The release clause, freedom from outcome and the healing of perfectionism. We return to the sacred text. We return to the desert. We return to the conversation between the patriarch and the servant that is rewriting the interior architecture of every soul that encounters it with openness and attention. Today we enter verse 8. And verse 8 contains what may be the single most practically healing theological principle in this entire passage. Abraham says, "But if the woman is not willing to follow you, then you will be free from this oath of mine. Only do not bring my son back there." Let us sit with those words. Let them breathe. Let them reach into the places in you that have been contracted for years by the silent, crushing belief that your worth is measured by your outcomes. You will be free from this oath of mine. The Hebrew word for free here is nagui, from the root naga, meaning to be innocent, to be acquitted, to be released from liability. In the legal context of the ancient Near East, nagui was the word spoken by the court when it declared a person not guilty. It was the word of absolute legal discharge, the declaration that the obligation has been fulfilled, that no further claim can be made, that the person stands entirely clear before the law. And Abraham is applying this legal vocabulary not to a verdict rendered after the mission is complete, but to a contingency built into the mission before it begins. He is declaring in advance that if the woman chooses freely not to come, the servant will be legally, morally, and spiritually acquitted. Not because he succeeded, not because the outcome was what Abraham hoped for, but because the servant acted faithfully within the boundaries of the mission as defined. The distinction here is between faithfulness and success as two entirely different categories of evaluation. And this distinction is one of the most radical, most countercultural, most psychologically liberating principles in all of Scripture. Because the entire framework of the world in which we live collapses these two categories into one. The world says, faithfulness without success is irrelevant. Results are the only true measure of real commitment. If it does not produce the outcome, it does not count. And the Word of God says, your calling is to go. God's calling is to provide the result. These are two different responsibilities held by two different agents, measured by two different standards. The great 20th century missiologist and theologian Leslie Newbigin, who spent decades as a bishop in South India, and who returned in his later years to write some of the most penetrating analyses of Western culture and mission in the modern era, made an observation about this distinction that cuts to the heart of the modern church's identity crisis. He said that the church in the West has largely absorbed the culture's assumption that the mission will be validated by its results. That numerical growth is the proof of faithfulness, that organizational success is the evidence of divine approval. And he argued that this assumption is not only theologically wrong, it is spiritually corrosive. It replaces the posture of the sent servant, who is responsible for faithful action and must trust God with outcomes, with the posture of the corporate manager, who is responsible for results and will modify the method until the results appear. Abraham's release clause is the antidote to this corrosion. It establishes with legal clarity that the servant is responsible for the direction of the mission, not the response of the one who receives it. The mission is to go. The mission is to offer. The mission is to present the gifts, to speak the Father's words, to wait for the answer. But the mission is not to manufacture the answer. This is liberation for every parent who has poured love, prayer, and wisdom into a child who has chosen a different path. You are nagi. You are released from the outcome. Your faithfulness in the sowing does not obligate the harvest. This is liberation for every pastor, teacher, counselor, and intercessor who has labored faithfully over a soul and not seen the transformation they prayed for. You are nagui. The servant's faithfulness is complete when the mission is faithfully carried. The bride's choice is hers. The Spirit does not coerce. And neither is the servant culpable for the Spirit's restraint. This is liberation for every entrepreneur, every artist, every creator who has put everything they have into a vision that the market, the critics, or the audience has not received as they hoped. Your call was to create faithfully. The response belongs to a different dimension of the covenant economy. Now let us go deeper into the clinical and psychological dimension of this release. Because perfectionism, the belief that your worth is contingent on the flawlessness and success of your outcomes, is one of the most prevalent and most destructive forms of inner woundedness in the modern world. The psychologist Brené Brown, whose research on vulnerability and shame at the University of Houston has reached a popular audience of millions, distinguishes between the perfectionist mindset and the wholehearted life. The perfectionist, she argues, is someone who uses performance and achievement as a shield against shame, who believes at the deepest level that if they can just do everything right, produce everything perfectly, achieve every goal, they will be protected from the devastating verdict of worthlessness that their shame voice whispers constantly in the background. But the shield never works. Because perfectionism does not remove the shame. It merely delays it. The perfectionist is always one failure away from the full weight of the shame that they have been running from. Always one missed outcome away from the conclusion that the shame voice has been waiting to deliver. Abraham's release clause cuts through this entire structure at its root, because it establishes that the servant's worth, his standing, his identity within the covenant relationship with Abraham and with God is not contingent on the outcome of the mission. He is nagui even if the woman says no. He is innocent even if he comes back without the bride. He is released even if the result is not what the father hoped for. And the reason he is released is not because the outcome does not matter. The father clearly hopes for the bride to come. The covenant purpose requires the bride. The outcome matters enormously. But the outcome is not the servant's responsibility. The faithfulness of the journey is the servant's responsibility. And faithfulness is measured not by what the mission produces, but by whether the mission was carried in alignment with the covenant character of the one who sent it. This is the difference between the gospel and every other system of human motivation. Every system of human motivation ultimately reduces to a performance equation. You are worthy if your output meets or exceeds the standard. The gospel introduces a completely different equation. You are worthy because the one who sent you has already declared you worthy, and no outcome can change that verdict. Now let us hold these two parts of verse 8 in tension, because they form one of the most perfectly balanced theological statements in the entire passage. Abraham says, "If the woman is not willing, you are free from this oath." But then he immediately adds, "Only do not bring my son back there." The release from the outcome is absolute, but the release from the direction is not given at all. You are free from the result. You are not free from the boundary. This is one of the most precise and important distinctions in all of covenant theology. The servant cannot be held responsible for the bride's choice, but he can absolutely be held responsible for whether he maintains the covenant boundary that Abraham has established. He cannot force the woman to come, but he can absolutely be required not to bring Isaac back. The release clause releases the servant from performance anxiety. It does not release him from covenant faithfulness. And these are two different things, which the modern mind tends to collapse into one. We often confuse the freedom from outcome with a freedom from any fixed direction. We say, if I cannot guarantee the result, then I cannot be committed to a specific method. But the covenant does not work this way. The covenant says, you are free from the result. But the method, the direction, the boundary, these are not negotiable. Go, seek, offer, speak, wait. But do not go back. Not as a path to securing the outcome, but as an expression of covenant fidelity independent of what the outcome turns out to be. This is the paradox of covenant freedom. You are most free when you are most firmly committed to the direction. Not because the direction restricts your autonomy, but because the direction releases you from the exhausting burden of managing every variable in the equation of the outcome. Now let us connect this principle to the cross of Jesus Christ, because every thread of this passage leads there, and this thread in particular leads there with extraordinary directness. At Gethsemane, Jesus prays, "If it is possible, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not my will, but yours be done." This prayer is the ultimate covenant release clause spoken in the direction of the Father. Jesus is releasing the outcome, surrendering the management of the result, handing over the question of what suffering is required and what the cross will produce into the hands of the Father who sent him. He is nagui from the burden of engineering the outcome. His faithfulness is to walk the direction the Father has given him, all the way to the end, regardless of what the outcome looks like from the valley of Gethsemane. And the Father receives that prayer, not by removing the cup, but by sending an angel to strengthen him. The same angel who goes before the servant in Genesis 24 is the angel who strengthens the Son in Gethsemane. The prevenient grace that prepared the well in Nahor city also prepared the garden in Jerusalem. And the release clause that Abraham built into the servant's mission finds its ultimate expression in the words of the crucified Christ. It is finished. Tetelestai. The mission is complete. Not because every hoped-for result was visible from the cross. Not because the disciples who fled are proof of success, but because the direction of the covenant has been maintained all the way to the last breath, and the Father who sent him will attend to the outcome. Receive this word today with everything you have. You are released from the burden of manufacturing outcomes that only God can produce. You are freed from the tyranny of the perfectionism that has been crushing you for years. You are nagui from the verdict that says your worth depends on whether the mission succeeded by visible standards. Go. Be faithful. Maintain the covenant direction. And trust the God who goes before to attend to what your obedience produces. Let this heal the perfectionist wound in you. Let it release the clenched place in your chest that has been holding the impossible weight of being responsible for other people's responses. You are not responsible for the woman's willingness. You are responsible for your own faithfulness. And in the covenant, that is enough. Let this become your declaration today. I release the outcome into the hands of the God who goes before. I am responsible for my faithfulness, not for the results that are beyond my control. I am free from the burden of perfectionism. I walk forward in the covenant direction with everything I have, and I trust the one who sent me to complete what my obedience has begun. Subscribe to this channel, like this video, and share it with someone who needs to be released from the crushing weight of outcome-based identity. Write to us at christforlife443@gmail.com. Stay tuned for the next video. Join us next time as we continue verse by verse.